Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Sailing Melody. If you're new to the channel, basically what's happening, we're in the process of restoring and getting this 1974 Bowman 46 yawl ready for us to set sail in just a few weeks. In fact, we're setting sail early May and it's now mid-April, so we've got about 2 or 3 weeks to get the boat ready to go. We've been house sitting over winter, so we're also in the process of kind of moving back aboard. Prior to house sitting, we were sort of living on the boat. We are Andy and Melissa and Jack, who's 12, and Ollie, whose first birthday is this Friday. So yeah, in this episode, I'm having a look at the anchor and the autopilot system and a little bit of wiring. Hope you enjoy the episode. Cheers.
Okay, so good morning everybody. One of the things that I did in Dartmouth when we were picking the boat up and prepping her to just sail back up here was I fitted an anchor windlass, and I had to do it in a bit of a hurry because we were, we had lots to do and not a lot of time. So this is the anchor windlass that I fitted. It's flat on the underside and the deck has got a camber on it. So the windlass has never really sat flat properly on the deck. So what I want to do, I've already made a plinth for it, which I'm going to show you in a second, and I've just been and removed the anchor chain from the locker because now I've got to get inside the locker to take the bolts off to remove this. Now, one thing I do know is that one of the bolts, there are 4 bolts that hold this down, and one of them is sheared. It was like that when I bought the windlass. So that might put a bit of a kibosh on the whole proceedings because today is Saturday and everywhere's shut. But on Monday, I might be able to take this to a machine shop and have the stud removed. I do have a stud extractor, but I could spend hours on this trying to drill down the middle of a bolt and using a stud extractor where a machine shop might do it in minutes. So it might be worth just doing that. Let me show you the plinth that I've already made. This is the plinth that I made for the anchor windlass a couple of weeks ago, and I've been sort of doing several coats of Epiphanes varnish on it. It's got the camber already cut into the underside of the piece of wood. It's the right size, and I've got this piece here where the hose pipe is going to go through so that water on the deck doesn't go down the hose pipe. That's the idea. But the first thing I've got to do, of course, is get the windlass off. So I'm going to put you on a head cam and go crawling around in there. I hate this bit. I find it very claustrophobic in there. Right, so let's go and get this anchor windlass off. Now, as I said earlier, this bolt is sheared out. I'm going to have a game, I think, getting that out, but we'll have a go. This here is a set of stud extractors. I have very little faith in them. The concept is that they dig themselves into a hole that you've drilled, and you put the drill in reverse and it winds the screw out, so and the more pressure you put on, the harder it digs into the screw. But the stuck stud, I've never had much success with them, probably because I'm using them wrong. But I'm going to have a go now, and then if it doesn't work, it'll be take it to a machine shop and have somebody who actually knows what they're doing do it. No. No. Fail. Okay, so while we wait for an engineering shop to have a look at taking that sheared stud out of the anchor windlass, I'm going to look at something else that we need to tackle. An autopilot is a really important thing for us because obviously as a family of 4 with 2 adults and 2 kids, if one of us is dealing with a child and the other person needs to suddenly deal with the other child or sail the boat single-handed, having some way of the boat steering itself is really crucial. Now we've got an autopilot and it's this Nico system. It's very old, it's all analog, and lots of people have said they're absolutely brilliant. They're bomb-proof, really reliable. Try and get that working if you possibly can, because they're worth their weight in gold. So don't let anybody convince you to get rid of it. Eventually we'll need to upgrade to something more modern, but if we can get this working, then great. Now, it sort of works, but sort of doesn't. When you turn it on, it engages the clutch, or it engages the brake on the motor at the back, so you can't then turn the wheel. Yeah, it's off at the minute. But it won't steer the boat, and I've found some broken wires down in the cockpit enclosure that I'm going to have a look at fixing. Back here in the aft cabin, under this bunk, is this enormous motor and geared system. This is the motor with the main sort of servo control, if you like, the forward and reverse, and that works fine. We actually had that paired up to a newer Raymarine head unit, and it was driving, you know, it drives this motor, then drives this chain which drives the steering, and that seemed to work okay, you know. But we couldn't calibrate that Raymarine unit, which I'd bought second hand. So I'm thinking I'm just going to have a look at this broken wiring issue. Down here in the cockpit enclosure is the wiring I'm talking about. Look at this. Methinks that might be the problem. There's 2 lots of wires, one that goes, I think, to the flux gate compass, which is in the aft cabin under the work surface in the heads, and the other one goes to the actual brain. Now I'm hoping that if I just make those connections good, then we might have a working system. My plan is for now just to get this up and working. I'm going to use these Wago connectors. I don't think they're the best thing for the job. If I decide to use them, I'm going to replace the plastic enclosure on the bulkhead here with a waterproof one and put these through some cable glands. If anybody's got any suggestions for a better way to do this, I'm open to your suggestions on this, really, because obviously normally for something like this, I don't know, I would personally solder and heat shrink them probably, but something tells me that's not the right way to do it either. So I'd value your input on this for suggestions for, you know, this thin cabling here. I've got to connect that to that, and then I've got to join up these ones. Wago connectors maybe, or is there a better way of doing it? I'm sure there's a better way of doing it. While I was beavering away with windlasses and autopilot systems, a couple of our YouTube followers turned up to help out by doing a few jobs to ease my workload. Ian and Len have been following the channel for a while, and they're both very handy on the tools, so they got stuck in installing more 240 volt sockets around the boat. Now that doesn't mean that we can just plug stuff into every socket at the same time and overload the system, but it does mean that we don't have to have extension cables trailing all over the place to be able to get power where we need it. Len's still here, look, doing more wiring, and I'm having dramas with the autopilot. I've done those bits of those dodgy connections, and I've reconnected them with the Wago connectors, but it hasn't worked because I'm still getting the same result. When I switch it on, with it off here, I can turn the wheel. Lovely, 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 that's fine. But when I switch it on, it engages the brake, so I can't now turn the wheel, but the controls don't do anything. So it's doing something, but it's not doing what it should do, which tells me there must be more problems with that wiring somewhere else. I'm going to go through to the aft cabin heads, which is the other side of that bulkhead, and see if we've got problems there as well. Right, so here in the aft heads, this is the flux gate compass, which will mount on the underneath of this new worktop that I've put in. The wires that I've just reconnected come through this bulkhead here, look. So one of them is this wire here that comes up and comes to the flux gate compass. That all looks to be intact. Very old school chocolate blocks. The other one, so that I don't think the problem's there, oddly enough. I don't think it is. That looks fine to me. And the compass itself is gimbaling and looks to be all right. So I'll come back to it if that seems to be a problem, but I don't think it is. Obviously that needs a better enclosure and needs refurbing at some point, but let's leave that for now. Under this berth here is the motor and drive unit, as I've said, and the other cables come through here for sending signal to this very old school analog servo controller. So I'm going to check the connections to all of these cables and see if there's anything suspicious looking there. This cable here that you're looking at, Andy put in when we were trying to get the motor to run from the Raymarine brain. So maybe it's just now that I need to reconnect this motor to its original. But if I undo these two Wago connectors here, and then there's a red and, oh, are they both red? Yeah, there's two red wires here.
Yeah, so all they go straight to the trigger on the relay. So
They go straight to what, sorry?
They go to the relays to fire the relays to drive the motor.
Forward and backward, right, yeah. This long wire here, we wired up and brought in from the cockpit when we were trying to make this motor run from the Raymarine Type 300 brain, which didn't work for several reasons. The motor still turns left and right, look. So that's not a problem. What I just need to do is disconnect this cable that we brought in from the outside and connect those two wires back to the original terminals, and let's just see if that works. Meanwhile, Len is still beavering away down there, fitting more electrical sockets. He's got his head down. Try and turn it off and see what happens. Nothing at all. Nothing at all happens. Pants. Now I'm turning the flux gate compass to see if it's doing anything. It's doing nothing at all. This isn't working. So as I've demonstrated, I can get the motor to turn left and right by contacting the relays. But there's something wrong somewhere, and it's beyond me, and Andy's not here, and Andy's busy, which is completely fine. So I'm going to come back to this Neko system another time. In the meantime, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to try and control it using this. So why am I delving into this whole subject of the old, obsolete autopilot system when I've got a Raymarine one on the boat? I've got the Raymarine head unit in the cockpit. Well, this is the one that I bought off eBay ages ago, a long time. This is the Type 300 brain, and into it plugs a thing called a flux gate compass, and that all feeds into a control head unit in the cockpit. And we got all of that working, even to the point where it would turn the wheel left and it would turn the wheel right, port and starboard. But when we went out, you've got to calibrate these things. What you have to do is put it into calibration mode and go round in a figure of 8. And we got it into calibration mode and we went round in a figure of 8 for about an hour, and it just never got a lock. So we checked all of the wires and the cables. Andy did this and he checked the impedance and the continuity, and everything was good, but we just never managed to get it to work. So what I've done is taken it off the boat, and we're going to bench test that, and we may either upgrade to a different one or sell this one if it works, or get it working and use it ourselves. But either way, it's off the boat for now. And as I've pointed out, the one that I'm fitting is this, which is a standalone unit, and it doesn't need calibrating because it doesn't really have a brain. It's just got a compass and some wires in it. So what I've managed to do is this now. I've wired this up very crudely. So I've got power going to it, and I've taken this long wire, which I showed earlier, which goes all the way to the motor solenoids in the aft cabin. Now if I turn this on, right, so I've got this facing forwards, and it's got -1 +1 degrees, -10 +10 degrees. It's got a rudder position so you can center the rudder, and it's in standby mode at the minute. The red light's flashing. But if I press auto, I take it out of standby mode into auto, and it tries to steer the boat. It's trying to hold the boat. Now that's me turning the head unit. Now we're facing forwards, facing forwards, facing forwards, and the boat veers off course. Oh look, and it corrects. And then turn it the other way and it corrects. So that's me turning it back as though the boat's turned back onto a correct heading. The boat this thinks the boat's turning port and starboard, and it isn't. It's just this that's turning port and starboard, which is triggering the solenoids to go left, right, port, starboard, and turn the wheel. That works, okay guys? So what I need to do is find somewhere to mount that in the cockpit, and I'm probably going to mount it where this head unit is that doesn't work. That one is the autopilot control brain, the control head unit that goes with the Type 300 brain down there. So I'm going to take this off, and I'm going to mount that fairly old and ugly but functional and working control unit here, and run the cables to it this way. Okay, this is brilliant. So we've now got an autopilot. Let me just show you this. So this unit here still engages the clutch on. So now I can't turn the wheel, right? Can't turn the wheel. This is on standby. So when I click auto, it will try and keep us on this heading. And again, I've used Wago connectors to connect it up to make it work, and then now that it works, I'm going to, you know, put some more substantial connectors on. And if anybody has got any suggestions for better ways to do that, I've got crimped connectors. That I've got really decent quality crimped connectors, and I can obviously solder and heat shrink them, and I can use the Wagos. But I'm just going to leave it as it is, make it work, and then scratch my head while I think about what connectors to actually put. Now, doing this, fantastic, but of course it's given me more problems, because that's the way boats work, isn't it? And the problem it's given me is this. Now, when we bought the boat, all the electrics had been basically ripped off of it. Whoever had the boat before us in the yard in Dartmouth, I think he basically cannibalised the boat for anything he could flog on eBay. Which in some ways is a pain, but in other ways it's like, well, it's a clean slate, isn't it? It's a good place to start. And once you've bought something on eBay, you can't really go back and say, oh, you didn't do this with it. It's just what you do, isn't it? Right, so I've let this board drop, and it's pulled all of these cables off, and I've got to try and figure out which one goes to where on the back of the switch panel. I'm going to rebuild the whole of this, okay? I'm not going to leave it looking like this. That's unbearable and intolerable. But there are only so many hours in the day, and it's a job that I will get round to. It works. It's not very good, is it? So things I've taken out of that panel above the chart table. Again, when we were bringing the boat back from Dartmouth, I just went down there with all the old tats that I'd got, because I didn't know what was on the boat, what was not going to work, what was going to work. So I put a load of stuff on and wired it up just as a get you home thing with some redundancy. So we've got this chart plotter, which I bought off Mike, which is a Raymarine A60. Now that I'm going to remount. I'm going to keep that. We've got a new chart plotter, an Axiom 7, which is going to go in the cockpit when I rewire and replace, you know, reposition all the instruments in the cockpit. But that is going to stay above the chart table, so that's a keep. The exhaust alarm, that is an exhaust temperature alarm, and it has a band that goes round the exhaust to let you know if your exhaust overheating. I quite like that. I think I'm going to probably keep it, but I'm not going to mount it for now, so that's a keep, but for later. I've got a Vespa AIS, a Garmin Vespa, that works, and I've got this old NASA AIS radar receiver unit only. I'm not going to put that above the chart table and hard mount it. It's very old school. It does actually work. I'm going to keep that in a jiffy, in a dry bag somewhere, in a sandwich bag, just in case if our main AIS fails, I've got one in a bag somewhere I can dig out. So that won't be mounted. It will be kept as spares. I've got this old Garmin chart plotter. These are actually, they're really super old school, but they're really reliable and they're really good. So again, I'm not going to mount it, but I'll probably keep it in a bag somewhere, because if we get struck by lightning and it blows everything, I can dig out some old school hard wearing, you know, reliable old stuff that I've got in a bag somewhere deep in the bowels of the boat, cobble it together in an emergency, and we've got sort of basic stuff that we can use in the future. And that there is the head unit that goes with the Raymarine autopilot brain, the Raytheon autopilot brain, and we've never managed to get that to work. So that's not going on. These aren't going on. The only thing that's going back above the chart table is that, and of course the Vespa AIS, and the we've got a repeater for our depth and what have you, a tri-data. So that's going in there. But now the piece of wood has got loads of holes in, look. So that's the hole for the chart plotter. That's the hole for that NASA AIS thing. That's where the exhaust alarm was. This we need to keep, the tri-data, because we want that. And of course we want the VHF, but we don't need that Garmin thing mounted. So I'm tempted to just scrap this horrible piece of plywood and put a new fascia up there with, you know, the basics up there. Okay, so the autopilot is now working after a fashion. We've at least got some way of the boat steering itself. I've got two other ways that I'm going to implement something as well on that score. But for now, we have an autopilot. It works. Stop, walk away. The next thing on my agenda, as I was ranting about earlier, is the anchor windless. Now, the anchor windless itself, I have dropped at an engineering shop in Bangor, and they're going to try and extract that stud for me. I said, how long will it take and how much will it cost? And he just kind of laughed. So who knows, I may get that back before the weekend, or it may be in next week's episode. But the other thing that I want to do is look at where the batteries mount under here, and make a suitable platform to hold the batteries down so that they're all clamped in place. And then I'm going to start thinking about, you know, when I bring the windless back, new wiring and that kind of stuff. So under here is our windless battery tray. Now as I say, we were in a rush to get back from Dartmouth, so I just shoved a battery in here, stuck the wiring on, and that was that. Which is not a very good way of doing it, because the battery can bounce up and down. It's pretty dangerous actually, but you know, it was fine and no dramas occurred. What I want to do is I'm not sure whether to put two windless batteries or one. I may even go as far as putting a pair of them. But the first thing I want to do is give this a clean and put in a floor in here with some method of bolting down, but really securing these batteries properly so that they can't move around, whether it's one or two, and then eventually I'm going to need to put in a split charge relay or a DC-DC charger to keep these charged. But one thing at a time. First things first, I'm going to measure up and cut a piece of wood to put a false floor in here. Just want to stop this time lapse for 1 second just to give a huge thank you to Len and Ian. Now, Ian has helped me in the past. Ian actually donated the Starlink for our boat and has helped us in several ways over the years. Last week, Ian and Len came up to help and they've spent several days fitting sockets all around the boat. So we've now got double sockets with USBs either side of the forepeak. There's loads in the galley and round the chart table and in the saloon and in the kids' bedrooms, which is just going to be amazing. So thank you. Ian actually had a big problem with his van and it all turned into a drama for him. So I just felt awful. He'd driven all the way from South Wales to help and then had problems with his van. So, but anyway, all that aside, thank you so much, Ian and Len. Your help means the absolute world to us. It's people like you and you know the other people that have helped on the channel over the years that just make this tedious job sometimes into something that we can cope with and take the load off. So cheers, guys. And the advantage of that, of course, is that I can run power tools in here, so I can do a routed beveled edge around the edge of this. So there you go, I've got the battery tray cut to shape, and I've got the bolts that are going to hold the clamps down to hold the batteries sturdy. They've been drilled and tapped into the plywood and then got a nut on the back. And the whole lot is glassed in all the way around. So that should last a good long time and should hold our batteries nice and secure. You might be wondering why I've cut out those two holes in the battery tray. It's simply because if I ever want to get access to the hull, if we hit something and we have problems and there's water coming in and I want to be able to see under that battery tray, I can lift the batteries out and still see under there. I didn't want to sort of glass in an area that I couldn't get to in the future. Now that I've got that anchor windless battery tray curing and fiberglassed in place, I've got a little bit more time here today. So I'm going to make a start on this area here. It's this backboard here. Now that I've removed a bunch of stuff, it's just a disaster, isn't it? So I'm going to start ripping this out and assessing the situation and looking at how I can rebuild that. I might not start rebuilding it today. I might just get to the point where I think, right, okay, I see what I've got here and I need to do it on a different day, because I've only got about 2 hours left here today, and maybe doing that in 2 hours is a bit ambitious, but we'll see. Well, as you can see, I've got the whole chart table panel stuff stripped right back to the bare fiberglass. That's the bare fiberglass of the boat, and I'm not going to start rebuilding it now. That took longer than expected, but actually not, because I was expecting it to take a long time, because this is a boat and everything takes a long time. So I'm going to shelve it here, and I'm probably going to go home and edit this episode. Because there's a lot in it already, so you're going to have to pick up next week. So next week there should be more news on the anchor windless, more news on the anchor windless battery installation, more news on a new control fascia here where I can start mounting, you know, new switch panels and stuff, and putting the instruments in that I actually need, and hopefully news on the sale of Steel Melody. So thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. If you have, please leave us a like and a comment, and if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. It does make a big difference, because the more subscribers we get, the more YouTube pushes our videos to other people. So if you're watching and not subscribed, please do go ahead. Thank you very much to our patrons, as always, for supporting us, and anybody who's given through coffee or through super thanks, that's amazing, or through PayPal, or anything like that. So it really, really is appreciated, guys, and it just means that we can carry on, you know, doing this project. Cheers, guys. See you next time. Bye bye.